Good morning, folks. At the beginning of this video, we're going to look at some of the severe storm potential today, tomorrow, and then into Saturday as well. If we just look at the radar presentation as this morning, you can see some weak storms moving through northern Illinois, southern Wisconsin, portions of Michigan, and then further south Louisiana, parts of Mississippi as well. Weakening here, obviously this morning and this morning hour, but we'll take a look at that and where things are going today. We've obviously seen a lot of activity in the southern plains. They've had too much moisture. There were flood warnings posted for portions of Oklahoma, North Texas as well. I wish I could say that we're out of the woods in terms of more precipitation or more thunderstorms, but I think tonight we have more to talk about in that regard as well. And then potentially next week with some flooding concern creeping back up in portions of eastern Texas, portions of Oklahoma, the southern plains that we'll have to look at. Getting kind of the middle of the video, we've been talking repeatedly about this lack of momentum in May from the Jetstream. In fact, I think we're somewhat in that regime now, despite quite a bit of the storms and precipitation we've had to talk about. So we'll take a look at that, where we might be going in mid-May. And then near the end of this video, I'll segue that into, I've had a lot of questions, frankly, recently about where California's temperatures might go this summer. We've seen a lot of warm and hot years in the past, just kind of last 5, 6, 7 years in California. So I'm liable to just say it's going to be warm and hot, but I think there's some nuance to that forecast, some interesting differences from last year, which was very hot in California, that I'm going to deep dive into near the end of this video for those interested in that. At least this morning, if we look down at lightning strikes, much like I did on Tuesday, you can see where those are landing. Quite a few of them. You just noticed right when I switched over there in portions of East Texas, southern Louisiana, central Louisiana, and portions of Mississippi, up into Ohio and Michigan, where these showers and storms are weakening here this morning. Now, yesterday, that activity was shifted off to the west a bit. Arkansas, severe reports in Texas, a few tornado reports in there, a weak tornado reported near Neoga, Illinois, and then some scattered wind and hail beyond that. Now, I mentioned this activity starting to shift off to the eastern U.S. a bit, as it has a little bit this week. This trough that's weak here positioned really across maybe Arkansas this morning, funneling some of those moisture and showers up into the northern Midwest, I should say. We're seeing that activity shift off to the west or east, but looking to the west, we still have this general troughiness, and that's almost being reinvigorated or strengthened by the subtropical jet stream, which is still cranking. And I was kind of curious looking at that. You can see it flowing south of Hawaii up into Texas. I think that's part of the reason why we're still seeing activity over the next day or two in this area, is because we still have this subtropical jet stream helping to organize just enough organization for the thunderstorms, the severe thunderstorms that developed there. So I went back, as I mentioned, to about the middle of April, and I took it through the end of the month, or as far as I could go, to April 28th, in this reanalysis data here. And I asked it for anomalous jet stream level winds and where that was stronger or weaker just over the last kind of 2 weeks here. And you can really kind of draw that subtropical jet stream, again, south of Hawaii, south of Hilo here, up into the southern plains, and that's been fueling some of the severe weather, the flooding, and other activities we've seen across the southern plains and through other portions of the central U.S. here this week, and even a little bit before that as well. Another kind of feature to note on here, and I'm going to bring this up again, which is why I mentioned it here, is the subtropical troughing that we're seeing over the kind of the Caribbean, the Greater Antilles here. And this has a function. It can actually reduce the amount of Gulf moisture getting up into the central U.S. So while we've had severe weather to talk about, and we're going to continue to have severe weather to talk about, we've seen some days that maybe haven't performed total to their, how high the ceiling we thought would be. And in general, as we've kind of gone through April here, we haven't seen this kind of peak in severe weather activity that we typically expect maybe in late April and early May. So we're going to talk about where that might be going looking forward as well. We just look at another way to see the influence of that subtropical jet stream coming up again out of south of Hawaii and in northern Mexico up into the southern plains. Look at all the precipitation we've had over the last 14 days, Oklahoma, portions of Missouri, North Texas as well. This is valid as of yesterday here, April 30th, but this would have filled in even further overnight. And just as I say that, if we jump over and look at the last 24 hours of precipitation across portions of the Mid-South and Southern Plains, wide swath of 1 or even 2 inches total for the last 24 hours in this area here. So just a tremendous amount of rain. Because of that, we've seen flood warnings posted, flood watches as well, and then all the way down the Mississippi River here, right? As some of that water, a lot of that water that got into portions of the Mid-South earlier this spring has made its way through, and then now the flood warnings out for Oklahoma, making their way through the Red River down into the Mississippi River here. So we'll have to watch that as we go over the next few days as well. I'm going to jump over and look at the 3-kilometer NAM, get an idea of where these thunderstorms might be forming today. I'm going to make this forecast, update it here, and I'm going to make this valid as of about 6 a.m. this morning at the recording of this video. And we can see this actually analyzes pretty nicely with those showers and storms across Michigan, southern Wisconsin, northern Illinois. Now, I always remind folks when they bring up the NAM that it looks hot. And what I mean by that is these thunderstorms look a little bit stronger than they are. It's not like we have widespread severe thunderstorms across the upper Midwest here this morning. These are really just kind of weak, rumbling showers at this point, but it does capture that MCS moving through Louisiana nicely here. So take this forecast through this morning here, you can see that activity weakening, but new storms firing this afternoon. We're now 3 p.m. Central Time in portions of the Appalachians, and we're watching this stretch back along a line here through the Mid-South into central Texas, and some potential weak showers and storms forming closer to the center of that trough further to the west. So take the forecast out to 6 p.m. You can see some of that activity shifting even further east across portions of Pennsylvania, down through portions of the southeast, central Texas. And then we've seen a pretty strong signal. I'm watching this closely in the overnight. This is 8 p.m. now, Central Time, of a potential thunderstorm complex racing through the panhandle of Texas, looking pretty vigorous now, getting into central Oklahoma at 3, 4, 5 a.m. Central, and more rainfall coming behind this over an area right where I just circled with flood warnings. So keeping an eye on this overnight. It has a pretty good agreement, or model accord, sometimes that we call it, and a number of different models have picked up on the signal here. Now, the exact kind of swath where this comes through, there's some details yet to be said. We don't even know exactly, which county it's going to form in. But in the overnight, we're watching this kind of corridor here for potential windstorm moving through the Oklahomas. Can't rule out some hail and weak tornadoes with that as well. If we look at the day one convective outlook from the Storm Prediction Center, we'll make this a little bit easier to see here. See a wide area of slight risk, all the way stretching up near Lake Erie, all the way back over toward the Texas Panhandle. Again, kind of advertising that potential wind threat overnight, and then some afternoon storms moving through portions of the upper Ohio River Valley. Day two, that activity shifts to the east a bit, and we can actually see this if we take the NAM forecast all the way into Friday afternoon. Kind of the remnants of whatever moves through kind of Oklahoma and Texas overnight is present here on Friday afternoon. And let's make this valid. It's about lunchtime Friday, so you can see those severe storms pushing to the east across portions of the Mid-South, eastern Arkansas, western Tennessee at 2 p.m. Friday. That activity is shifting further into the southeast by Friday evening. And then potentially by Saturday, I'll take this out to lunchtime on Saturday, seeing new storm development here across portions of the southeast. So it's kind of shifting zone of severe thunderstorm activity evident in the Storm Prediction Center outlook for tomorrow. The slight risk across central Texas, a wider area of marginal risk across portions of the Mid-South, even up into eastern Ohio, western PA, and then shifting even further to the east off the southeast into the Mid-Atlantic, the Carolinas, etc., as we go through Saturday. Now, the reason for that, I'm showing you the upper level height forecast from the ECMWF. I'm going to make this forecast valid here again. Let's do Thursday morning, 7 a.m. You can see the weak trough that I mentioned centered just to the west of the Midwest here this morning, bringing those showers to the upper Midwest, the remnant storm system down here. So take this forecast into tomorrow on Friday. See this troughing diving down here out of Canada, helping to organize some of that severe thunderstorm activity that we mentioned as potential in the southeast. Let's go through the day on Saturday. We see a trough now diving into California here. It's not particularly strong, but it still has to be talked about, especially because even these weaker troughs tend to move a little bit slower, and that can increase the flooding threat for portions out ahead of them. And I can say as that kind of dives in here on Saturday and Sunday, could see some showers across portions of California, the Central Coast, Southern California, the Central Valley, even expecting potentially a decent amount of snowfall in the Sierra Nevada all the way here late April, early May, kind of an uncommon time in the year. We're typically done with water in California as we get further into April and May at this point. But that trough, as I mentioned, being on the weaker side, somewhat disconnected from that polar jet stream, just stalls here. And we're all the way out now Monday evening. We can also see another remnant low kind of stalled across the Midwest at this point as well. And this is just going to bring copious moisture into the southern plains as we start the week early next week, now to May 6th, May 7th. And then north of that, you can see a dominant ridge developing across portions of the Canadian Prairie in the upper Midwest. We've been talking about this for a few days now. This ridge likely drying things out to the north of the southern plains. So we'll look at all that over the next few slides here. I want to jump over and look at the ECMWF precip forecast. It's going to give us an idea of where this trough is going to be influencing more of that rain in the southern plains. We talked about this already. I'm taking this forecast in through Thursday evening. See that area of slight risk that was kind of drawn from the Storm Prediction Center over a similar area. And there's that potential thunderstorm overnight, even evident in the ECMWF. This is 7 a.m. now, Friday morning, so potentially moving through late overnight into early tomorrow morning. That activity shifts off further to the south and east on Friday afternoon. And by Saturday afternoon and then evening, more thunderstorm activity across portions of the mid-Atlantic, stretching into the southeast. Rainfall associated with that. But this cutoff low that kind of lingers over the Midwest, it's very weak. But we're out now to Sunday, and unfortunately, this is going to, I think, spoil what otherwise would have been a decent weekend for portions of the central and eastern Corn Belt here with just some showers and lingering cloudiness and slightly cooler weather, which is unfortunate for folks probably trying to get back into the fields or enjoy a nice early May weekend. So take this forecast into Monday. Now, late Monday, we can see those storms firing back into the southern plains. Curious to see how far back some of these will go into the Continental Divide here, watching where that dry line will set up exactly. But seeing a strong precipitation signal now in the Texas Panhandle, eastern New Mexico. By Tuesday, that shifts further east, anywhere from Wyoming, eastern Colorado, western Kansas, central Oklahoma, down in the Dallas-Fort Worth metro area where we see the strongest signal for storms. This is Tuesday afternoon and evening, right back through portions of the Red River of the South, potential southern Mississippi River Valley, getting into late Tuesday and then early Wednesday, and then potentially more precipitation behind that on Wednesday to talk about over the same area. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, kind of a broken record, even into Thursday, falling over some of these same areas. Definitely a flood concern is increasing for portions of the Mid-South, getting over to the southern plains here as we go into next work week. We just look at the ECMWF 10-day precipitation departures from average. Well, it's evident kind of this area of focus next week in portions of the southern plains all the way into the Mid-South. And with that kind of lingering upper level trough here, also seeing quite a bit of activity over here in portions of New England. And then kind of that spoiled weekend showing up here in just those showers and storms over portions of the eastern Corn Belt as well. Now to the north of that broad ridge developing above that, if you remember that signature there, seeing a pretty wide area of dry weather close to this area of increased precipitation. And this really kind of gets going this weekend for a lot of these areas and could persist for a while out into next week. This ridge seems to have a lot of staying power in the long range that's getting out 7, 8, 9, 10 days. But it's definitely something we'll have to watch. And just to kind of showcase this, I pulled the precipitation forecast up for Des Moines, Iowa. On the top is the ECMWF. I've included the GFS and then the National Blend of Models, which blends a number of them together. See precipitation chances here over the next 2 days, even into tomorrow evening on Friday. NBM doesn't have that Friday evening precipitation, but beyond that, it's a big question mark. And this takes us all the way out to May 10th. There's a little blip from the GFS, but otherwise, no precipitation expected as we go through the whole of the next work week. And so conversation of drying out, the fields will be dry, work will be getting done. It's a question of when is that next precipitation coming through the Midwest or the upper Midwest. If we compare that to eastern Texas, Big Sandy here, precipitation chances waning now in this morning here. Another potential chance here on Friday evening. A break in the weekend finally as that next trough kind of consolidates over the four corners. But by the time it does that now into early next week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, precipitation chances picking up in a big way, potentially adding another 2, 3, 4 inches here. We just look at the ECMWF total precipitation forecast out through next week. This takes us all the way 7-day forecast out through May 8th. See a wide area of 2, 3, 4 plus inches of rain here, centered on eastern Texas, southwestern Arkansas, eastern Oklahoma. And again, the exact details of this are still kind of wobbling around a bit. So earlier this week, this would have been the area I was going to circle for the highest flooding chances, maybe Wichita Falls, which I mentioned. It's been shifting east through time, but it could just as easily shift back, a few dozen miles, and we're talking about a slightly different bullseye, so that's something to keep an eye on here. I haven't mentioned precipitation much here this morning, but if we look at maximum temperatures here from the National Weather Service forecasted, this is today on Thursday. I'm going to take this into tomorrow. See behind the troughing here, a little bit cooler weather in terms of those maximum temperatures coming down a bit, warmer in the east, warmer in the northwest. So that trough settles in over the weekend, cooler across the Midwest. I mentioned the spoiled weekend here over portions of the central and eastern Corn Belt. So higher level temperatures in the northern plains as now we're starting to see the influence of that ridge show up. And then that trough over California, temperatures much cooler here over southern California, portions of Texas on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. This kind of forebodes the precipitation that's going to be coming in associated with that trough. By Wednesday, likely, you can imagine, in early May, these cooler temperatures here indicative of showers and storms occurring over this area, but starting to warm up next week on Wednesday and Thursday as this drier stretch of weather settles in for the Canadian Prairie, the Northern Plains, and the Midwest. Minimum temperatures, no major frost risk in the forecast for portions of the Midwest here. Only temperatures only getting down to about the mid 40s, maybe the upper 40s and the low 40s and upper 30s by Sunday, May 4th. Temperatures falling across Southern California and Arizona here. South of the plateau, though, not expecting a major frost or freeze risk, with temperatures staying into the upper 40s or low 50s, and then that extends over into the mid-south as well. But again, not seeing a major frost or freeze risk in early April here from this pattern. Now I'm going to switch over. This is the ECMWF AIFS, and this is going to take us out to next week. I'm going to go to Sunday, now Monday. I'll pause it on Tuesday. There's that weak trough that's trying to make its way into Texas out of the Four Corners region, and early next week that's going to be bringing that precipitation that we talked about over this wide swath here. Potentially severe weather as well to talk about. Not expecting it to be as high level, and what I mean by that is not expecting kind of major tornado outbreaks at this point or anything like that, but certainly wind, large hail reports, again, kind of scattered tornado reports when we wake up the next morning, and we'll have to watch those as they come through. Let's take this forecast into Wednesday and now Thursday. See that weak troughing similar to this week, trying to push off out of that area, potentially bringing precipitation through portions of the mid-south or the southeast, but this ridge is just so dominant to the north. Been expecting a pretty broad area of drier weather here, positioned anywhere, again, from Alberta, Saskatchewan, through the northern plains, the upper Midwest, and then getting into the central Corn Belt. This is taking us out to Thursday next week, Friday, now out to May 9th. And again, this ridge just doesn't appear to be going anywhere. If anything, on the eastern edge of it's starting to get blocked up a bit. Eric and I have both been talking about this, where you have higher heights directly over lower heights, so troughing to the south, ridging to the north, and this is what we call an atmospheric block. When these tend to show up, they're indicative of a pattern or a ridge with some staying power, and that's the concern, because we're all the way up to May 9th here. I'm going to take this forecast forward, and you really don't see a major change in this ridge. It weakens a bit, allowing some troughing to get into the eastern Corn Belt, the mid-Atlantic, and the eastern U.S., potentially bringing some precipitation over here. But in terms of precipitation chances along this corridor, pretty much nil, I would expect, through the next work week, except for maybe portions of the central and eastern Corn Belt. And even taking out to May 15th. Now, I'm not going to put too much credence in this because we're all the way out to mid-May at this point, but still seeing that ridge signature. We can also see this, if we look in the forecast, I've showed this before. This is looking at severe weather chances. This graph it's hard to read, but this is the present day, and we're really looking at the top of this graph to see where are severe weather chances in the central U.S., particularly this time of year. And if we just look over, each box is a day, and we had those severe weather to talk about over today, tomorrow, and then in the east on Saturday. But look at the stretch of almost no severe weather to talk about into next week, and really it stays weak all the way out to mid-May. That takes us all the way out to about May 21st or 20th. And then beyond that, at least in this forecast here from the CFS, it's picking up chances again, but we're now 3-4 weeks out in the forecast. We can't put a lot of weight into the forecast out this far, but it does kind of pose this question that has been rolling around in my head. We know we're going to be in a lull here across portions of the Midwest and the upper Midwest in terms of severe weather potential over the next kind of 10 to 14 days with this lack of momentum. If that momentum returns right in late May, that's an area of climatologically where we could be very active. But kind of relying on that more spring-like 1 or 2 weeks off, 1 or 2 weeks on pattern where we were in early May or even late March, it gets harder to do that as you get into May and June. These patterns tend to linger a little bit longer, which is why this one even here is almost a 2-week off-like pattern here, taking us out to mid-May. And while I kind of am hopeful that we return precipitation chances, right, as we get into June here or late May, we can't rely on that sort of predictable spring-like return of momentum as we get further out into summer. Now, the May 8th through 14th forecast here, this is the 8 to 14-day temperature outlook from the Climate Prediction Center. You can see the influence of that ridge on their forecast. They're not always going with this much confidence here in that 8 to 14-day range. The precipitation outlook does start to bring in some light precipitation chances to the high plains here. The southern plains remain active, but really the Midwest and then going over drier in the mid-Atlantic and New England out through mid-May. If we look at their May outlook, which was just released here in the last 24 hours, very similar outlook with upper level or higher temperature contours here over the upper Midwest and kind of a wide area of above average temperatures likely for much of the kind of eastern 2/3 of the country. Kind of critically precipitation, drier over the northern plains, drier over the upper Midwest, getting into the central Corn Belt as well, wetter over the southern plains. What I'm seeing here from the Climate Prediction Center, and this makes a lot of sense, is uncertainty with where we're going in late May, because this forecast here is very similar to the first half of May forecast. And what I mean by that is, well, we just went through that kind of first half of May forecast where we're going to be wet in the southern plains next week, dry over the northern plains, dry over the Midwest. We don't see a strong signal kind of beyond that, I think, here at the Climate Prediction Center, and it kind of leaves the door open for a lot of questions in late May. Do we return to a higher momentum pattern from the atmosphere? Where that's coming from isn't clear to me at this point, which is why I'm hopeful we get more precipitation chances into late May, potentially, and unfortunately that might come with severe weather chances, but I don't see enough to forecast that right now. The ridge that is developing across the upper Midwest and the northern plains, at least next week, I can say confidently looks pretty dominant, and then we see some atmospheric blocking associated with that, which would only reinforce that, which lends some credence to, well, it may have a little bit more staying power than we want it to, and we'll have to tackle that as we get to it in mid-May. I want to shift the conversation a little bit over into California and the western U.S. precip, because I've been having, or temperatures I should say, I've been getting questions about summer temperature forecasts. We kind of deep dove earlier this spring into kind of a more worst case scenario where July temperatures peak over the Midwest and some of the ice states here. We've avoided that in some hot and drought years in the past, and I think that's really helped save the crop in some of those years. But in a lot of those years, we've been warm west regardless. And so the forecast kind of every year for the Western U.S. tends to be above average. And the reason for that is over the last kind of 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years, we've been warmer than normal in the Western U.S. anyway. And if I just pull up California's temperatures in summer, that is June, July, August, kind of as a proxy for that, going back even about to 1980, we've seen this decadal trend where every decade temperature trends over summer, that is their maximum temperature in summer, increase by about 1 degree Fahrenheit every 10 years. And what that does is it means that, well, now an average year over the last 10 years in California would have been one of the warmer ones over the last 80 years. So this is why that forecast so often in the Western U.S. is just warmer than average. The Climate Prediction Center for these forecasts uses 30-year averages, I think starting 1990 out to 2020, which are even about 5 years stale at this point. So if we've been warmer than average over the last 10 years anyway, even if we're just kind of on trend on that, we're going to be warmer than average in the color contour on that Climate Prediction Center forecast that I just showed you. So kind of curiously, I went in and I pulled up these relatively cool years from the past 20 years. I think I plugged in, this was 23, plugged in 2019 as well. I included 2011, 2000, not 2000, but 1999. And I said, show me the sea surface temperatures those years, because I was trying to look for a clue of what the sea surface temperatures this year might tell us. And kind of curiously, I plugged those in, 23, 19, 99, 2000, 93, 1989. And what I got was cooler waters near California. That makes a lot of sense. Cooler ocean waters likely influencing cooler ocean temperatures, but also that cool water stretching through portions of Cabo, or off the coast of Cabo, and then in through the central Pacific as well. Slightly warmer temperatures in the eastern Pacific, warmer temperatures north of Hawaii. This all looks to me like a fading La Nina tends to promote cooler temps in California, at least in terms of those maximum temperatures averaged over the summer months here. Now, as I was looking at this kind of was definitely showing up in some of these years. And I wanted to compare that to where we were this year, because we are slightly cooler than average in this area here. We've been going neutral. La Nina has been fading, but we do see those cooler temperatures off the coast of California, those cooler temperatures off the coast of Cabo, and then trying to stretch down here, at least in terms of more mild temperatures into the central Pacific. So I think there's enough here to say that while this summer might not be, cooler than average compared to, the stretch of years from 1930 all the way out to 1980, it could be on the cooler side for at least the last 20 years. So a year more akin to 2023 or 2019 or 2011. And that would be good news, because last year, 2024, was very hot for California. The evaporative demand was very high as well. Now, kind of throwing a wrench a little bit into this forecast is if you look at the sea surface temperatures last year in 2024, I'm going to pull those up. This was May 1st, 2024, so the same date. Well, generally speaking, we were cold off the coast of California. It was kind of broad. It was more scattered. The magnitude wasn't as cold. What I mean by that is you can kind of see a little bit more neutral temps kind of intermingled here. Definitely colder off the coast of California generally and Cabo. But what we didn't see, I think, was that lingering La Nina in the central Pacific. It was only just developing. You actually see the first kind of cooler eddies off of Peru here. So what I see this summer is sea surface temperatures more conducive to at least relatively cooler weather for California compared to the last 10 years. If we compare it to the last 80, it might very well end up warmer than average. Last thing I'll say is kind of looking out into the forecast here for late May. I think this graph, this is from Northern Illinois University. I think it sums it up well. What we're looking at here is a graph where left to right, we read from the South Pole to the North Pole. What we're looking at is momentum in the atmosphere, and we can think of this as really momentum in the jet stream. Now, we live and work at least in North America here in this stretch from about 20 degrees all the way out to 50 degrees north. At least this is where we're growing the majority of our crops here. And the momentum in the jet stream is reduced right now today. That is the red line. Where it typically is, this area is a bit stronger going into early May. And we've noted this in a few different ways. We've noticed it in the polar jet stream exiting further north up into Canada. We have more of the subtropical jet stream that's been lingering around, bringing the precipitation here this month. But as we get further into May, if this signature holds, the drought concern is going to grow pretty quickly for the central United States. And we'll have to watch where this goes, I think, in May here. Now, again, I've mentioned this. Will this just kind of predictably correct itself in a return as we get into late May? That's certainly possible. It's happened in the past, but there's nothing in the forecast right now where I can confidently say, yes, I see that, other than just it's happened before. That's kind of where we sit with this forecast. So we're going to be watching this closely going forward and seeing where this momentum distributes itself. Right now, we're seeing more momentum in the subtropical jet stream. We just talked about that over the last 2 weeks, how that's bringing that flow up and in over northern Mexico into the southern plains. That's why this red line here today shows more momentum than average in areas closer to the equator. So the subtropical jet stream kind of in this area here. And we also see a stronger polar jet. So the activity that should be over, Des Moines or Springfield, Illinois, is over portions of Canada, or that flow in the jet stream is over areas south of Hawaii. So we're going to see how this distributes itself in May. I think that's going to tell a lot of how much staying power the ridge has over the upper Midwest and where those dry concerns are going to pick up later this year. We still have some pockets here. Florida, the southeast, portions of the mid-Atlantic over into Maryland, eastern Pennsylvania, kind of a high-intensity area here over in southeast PA. And then, of course, some of the I-states here, Wisconsin, Michigan, northern Indiana, Illinois, still running some soil moisture deficits down into the soil here. This is the NASA estimates down to 40 centimeters here. Areas of Nebraska as well. Now, we've improved the situation quite a bit just over the last 30 days in portions of the southern plains and the northern plains, but there's some pockets in here that if May goes over dry and it stays that way for 2 to 3 weeks, we're talking about some potential drought reemergence. We'll get to that when we get to it. Eric will be back with you all tomorrow morning. And if you made it to the end of the video, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.